In late 1944, Allied bomber crews over Germany began reporting something the Air Force just couldn't explain. They called them Foo Fighters. The name actually came from a comic strip called Smokey Stover, where foo basically meant nonsense. The lights were described as glowing red, orange, or white orbs that flew alongside bombers, paced them for miles, and then, well, shot away at impossible speeds. The overlooked fact is that the military took these reports seriously. They were not dismissed as pilot fatigue or combat stress. So, the misconception is that Foo Fighters were secret German weapons. But honestly, there is just no evidence of that. In fact, German pilots reported seeing the same lights. The deeper question here isn't really what they were. The deeper question is why, hundreds of experienced observers saw the same impossible thing. The Air Force's final report on Foo Fighters contained exactly one firm conclusion. Whatever they were, they did not shoot. The first Foo Fighter sightings are usually credited to the 415th Night Fighter Squadron, operating out of France in November 1944. On the night of November 23rd, pilot Lieutenant Ed Schluter and his radar operator Donald Myers saw 2 rows of glowing orange lights climbing toward them. Myers said later, "I thought it was a reflection. Then I realized there was nothing to reflect. The lights paced them for 8 minutes." Other crews reported similar encounters. A B-17 pilot named James R.I. Wood described, and I quote, "a formation of lights that looked like a Christmas tree flying sideways." The lights appeared on radar. That was the detail that worried the brass. Radar does not get tired. Radar does not hallucinate. General Carl Spaatz, commander of United States Strategic Air Forces, ordered an official investigation. The report was classified and sent to the Pentagon. The memo summarized dozens of sightings. The lights had no sound, no heat signature, no apparent interest in shooting at anyone. German pilots, it turned out, had their own name for the lights. They called them Feuerbälle, fireballs. They were just as confused. One popular theory at the time was that the lights were German flying bombs or some new kind of anti-aircraft rocket. That theory had a problem. After the war, captured German scientists were asked about Foo Fighters. They had no idea what the interrogators were talking about. Another theory was ball lightning. But, ball lightning typically lasts seconds. These sightings lasted minutes or more. St. Elmo's fire was a known phenomenon, electrical discharge from sharp objects in storm clouds. But Foo Fighters appeared in clear skies. Some pilots suggested the lights might be reflections of their own exhaust flames bouncing off ice crystals. But that explanation never quite fit the radar returns. The military considered pilot fatigue, but the sightings came from fresh crews and veteran crews alike. Fatigue could not explain the radar. One overlooked factor is that night bombing was terrifying. The flak was constant. The fighters were deadly. The mind searches for patterns. When you are flying through flak, every puff of smoke looks like something. But, Foo Fighter sightings happened in clear air, away from flak. The official report concluded that the phenomenon was real, not imaginary. That is military language for, we have no idea. Modern atmospheric science has a candidate electromagnetic plasma formations. In certain conditions, the air itself can glow and move. But plasma formations are unpredictable, and honestly, still pretty poorly understood. Explaining Foo Fighters would require understanding a phenomenon we still cannot reliably produce. The Foo Fighter sightings faded after the war. There was no single explanation. There was only a stack of reports and a whole lot of veteran pilots who, knew what they saw. The term Foo Fighter later entered military slang as a kind of catch-all for any unidentified target. The phenomenon itself, though, remained unsolved. So, the Foo Fighter story matters not because of what it reveals about World War II, but because of what it reveals about observation under pressure. Hundreds of trained observers, using radar and, just their own eyes, reported a phenomenon that remains unexplained 80 years later. That is not failure. That is data. Military doctrine today includes a protocol for unexplained aerial phenomena. The Air Force learned from FOU fighters that dismissing reports is actually worse than just filing them. The pilots who saw Foo Fighters did not panic. They did not shoot. Instead, they watched, reported, and then went right back to the business of fighting a war. Subscribe to War Machiner and share this if you value history that goes deeper. We do not do dramatization. We just do the story, clearly.